So this is an excerpt from my upcoming novella, and it's about vampires after the climate apocalypse. And the point is kind of what's the point of living when there's not really anything left to live for? Because people, we take a hard life day by day, but the vampires, they take the apocalypse by night. So this excerpt is actually from chapters that focus on one of the younger vampires and his last days as a human. Kerouac had it the absolute best. He was a firm believer in this, although if asked the best of what, he might trip over some of the details. Was his idea of the best capped by his very limited knowledge of the world and narrow breadth of experiences? Furthermore, being the best at anything necessitated some sort of criteria. Did he think he had it the best in the whole world? He might have. He was alive, after all. And these days you couldn't get much more than that. But the best on the rock? That, Kerouac supposed, depended on who you asked. Spitshine didn't seem like he needed much, nor did he appear to have terribly high opinions of their prospects. Each day he lived to see was a small victory in itself. It was also another day of them kicking the can further down the road until one day the path would inevitably drop out from under them entirely and dump them into the post-mortal soup the world had become, to drown them or boil them alive or whatever else the ocean can do to them now. This set Spitshine in a squarely neutral position, which didn't feel all that much like winning. Still, Spitshine got points for contributing to Kerouac's best. It was thanks to him they weren't all shitting and pissing where they ate. Instead, they chose to deposit their waste in the furthest corner of the rock, where the hard water chewed at the edges of their very small, getting smaller island. It was also Spitshine that kept Shank and Riptide from turning the living arrangement on the rock into a total Lord of the Flies situation, by keeping food rationed and the people stoned-ish and well-lubricated, a standard for which the bar is getting higher every day. There was the matter of Shank and Riptide, of course, of which the former would insist he had it the best on the principle of needing to win, whereas the latter's answer would depend on his level of inebriation, and the fruitfulness of his exploits, and his near-constant frenzied jerking off. Neither of these felt like true victories to Kerouac, and so he felt content to count them out of the race as well. That left one last man on the rock. Mothman was an interesting case, not only because it made Kerouac want to take a longer, harder look at him to see exactly how, but also because Kerouac felt like he couldn't take so much as a peek to do so. Mothman had things the way Kerouac did, things outside of eating, fucking, shitting, and this set them both apart from the others on the rock. However, that was about where the similarities ended. Kerouac fancied himself a collector, a salvager, and in this way a savior to the tattered shreds of humanity that lingered, caught on the craggy edges of crumbling buildings and drowned under the weight of sunken cities. Even now, laying on the grimy layers of his makeshift mattress, a sleeping bag with insulation oozing out of a tear in the side, a threadbare sheet stamped with dirt and grease, and a crushed-down layer of dead leaves, destroyed magazines, and the illegible pages of dead books, Kerouac felt fierce pride in the things he had. His corner of the rock was transformative. To his left, he had the shining golden cities of the Inca, a name that meant nothing to him in the year 2150, that he trusted from the chipping cover of the National Geographic he'd plastered to the makeshift wall of his room. To his right, he had the icy faces of mountains jutting to immeasurable heights. Kerouac imagined that whoever had taken that picture must have had the luxury of being perched high above the world in her sickness. From such heights, their problems, maybe not so different from his, smeared together, insignificant. Just above him, tacked onto the bottom of a shelf, Kerouac had craftily set up above where he lay his head, if only to sleep under the illusion of intimacy, was the blue-purple bruise of the cosmos above. Sometimes, Kerouac would close his eyes and wonder at how high he'd have to go to glean the infinity-facing facets of the jewel-toned skies, so high that for all it mattered, up must be down, and down up, until suddenly you were swan-diving into the very fabric of existence. Mothman couldn't possibly have taken the same pleasure in his things that Kerouac had in his own, could he? His making and tinkering, not so different from Kerouac's archiving and preserving, but the subsequent destroying afterward, the smashing and dismantling, only to discard the fragments again. From trash it came, and to trash it went again, could not possibly contain the love Kerouac felt for his trinkets. Therefore, Kerouac thought in conclusion, he was pretty sure he had it the best. A small throb butted at the base of his skull, and Kerouac pinched it between his fingers, tried to rub it away. He reached into his pocket and procured the small round thing he had tucked there just the other day, when he'd found it. It had washed up on the shore, lopped onto the perimeter of the rock where most trash congregated these days. Barrels and driftwood and broken shards of plastic, decaying fabrics that seemed to be dissolving faster in the acidic ocean by the day, Mixed in with all of that, Kerouac had caught a flicker of something still intact, something that had endured like he did. He plucked it from the mess, from the viscera of the apocalypse's seemingly endless entrails. When people were sick, they were sick until the contents of their stomachs emptied. The world, it seemed, had an awfully big gut, which humanity had packed full of poison to expel, beneath a bloated sun. Kerouac studied the strange object in his hands, circular with a cracked face. The red arrow trembled and flickered, but against all else kept its head up. He smiled to himself, slipped it into his pocket once more, and rose, careful not to hit his head on the shelf, leaving the sleeping area for the heart of the island, where a fire burned amidst the concrete, tarnished black and green in some places, like a festering wound. Meanwhile, the rock coughed out black smoke to the jaundiced sky.